Hi everyone, welcome in the channel. Today we're going to talk about the logistics for e-commerce overall. Before we go ahead, remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed the video. Moving forward with our topic, today we're going to talk about the logistics for e-commerce. So there are a few things you should keep in mind when you decide to run your own e-commerce store and have some stocks shipped by a 3PL or outsource the logistics of your e-commerce store. The first thing would be to choose the partner wisely. So there are different ways of choosing the 3PL, third-party logistics, the warehouse, the fulfillment center. Call it the way you want, but the main purpose here is that someone ships, packs, stores the goods for you. If you're able to do so, then you save a lot of time and money because they know how to do it already compared to you that you don't really know how to, let's say, pack a product or way to keep track of inventories and so on. So, how can you actually choose the right partner? There are different variables that you should, let's say, keep in mind. The first one is the location, then the second one is the network that they have, and so on. There may be more things related to the choice itself. Just remember, where is your product made? And also, what's the closest location that I could use, or the most, let's say, strategic location that I could use. If you're selling only in the US, that of course it's worth it to just have a local warehouse in the US or a 3PL there. If you sell internationally, you may consider other locations too. It depends on the cost, on the network that your partner will have, on the level of service that they offer, the price, that's really important, and so on. So let's say that you outsource to a warehouse or fulfillment center the logistics of your e-commerce store, then you have something else to figure out. You need to figure out the couriers that you want to use because the price will be different if you use a postal service or an express courier, but also the level of service is different. We talk about those things in other videos as well. So you need to understand what's the how much you can spend on a shipping fee basically, and also what's the level of service that you want to offer. If you have two different, let's say, poles in terms of level of service but price as well, then you need to figure out a little bit more because you can't expect to have a great service and compensations for a postal offer for a postal option but a very cheap price. So there's of course a compromise that you need to reach for your own good, and that means that you either choose one or the other, or you try to find, let's say, a hybrid solution that can offer you a better level of service but a lower price compared to an express courier. But of course, you can lower down the prices and the transit time by having local 3PLs in the country you ship the most. But of course, for people that are selling internationally, that can be quite difficult. So there are different ways of optimizing also your costs, and that's mainly related to the way you pack your goods when you send the stocks to the warehouse, but also how you ship them, how you pack them for, let's say, the very final step, which is the delivery to your customer. So couriers charge you generally whichever is higher between volumetric weight and actual weight, so the size of your package matters a lot. I know that you all want to have fancy packages, and that's correct. It's nice to have because, as someone once said, the packaging experience is the only, let's say, marketing strategy that will have a 100% open rate. So of course, it needs to be nice, but also it needs to be sustainable under different points of view. Sustainable for the environment, but sustainable for your business as well. So if you have a very fancy packaging, but at the end of the day you pay a lot to ship out, well, it may be worth it to review the strategy and the design of your packaging to reduce the cost, because reducing the cost on packaging or the way you actually pack your goods, it really dramatically brings your, let's say, cost down and overall increase your profit margin, because it's like a fixed cost that you have all the time. There's, let's say, basically reduce while you keep selling more into more countries. You can still have a higher margin because you reduce the fixed costs. Then you need to understand also the Incoterms if you want to have an all-included price, or if you want to have, let's say, if you want to have the customer paying for duties and taxes, so you all have that part to be figured out, basically VAT numbers from where you're going to ship, if you're going to have your own contract with the courier, or if you're going to use the warehouse couriers. charges? Well, at the end of the day, you can choose pretty much the model that fits you the best. Generally, you may have more competitive rates when you use the warehouse contracts at the beginning, because you may have few shipments, but they ship a lot for their customers, for their clients. So of course they may have access to better rates compared to what you could have. But then, in the long run, you may want to consider to have your own contracts, or maybe not. It really depends on the benefits of it. If they just take and do everything for you, maybe worth it to just use the courier that the warehouse offers you. But if you want to have more control of the charges and everything, it may be worth it to have your own contract. It really depends. Many just go for warehouse couriers because it's so easy. You don't have to manage contracts and all the stuff. You just talk to one person in the warehouse, or let's say a team of people, and that's it. You don't need to talk to the warehouse, the courier, and then the forwarder, and then the manufacturer. So many people, but in that case you just reduce the gap basically and just have an all-included solution, and that's the beauty of it. So cross-border e-commerce is, of course, shipping goods from one country to another, but the logistics for e-commerce is not only cross-border e-commerce and how you ship, which courier you use, is many things. It's like the way you store the packaging, the way you store your goods, the way you choose your partner, your fulfillment center, the way you ship also, so which courier, the postal services, and so on. It's many things, the way you connect your manufacturer to your logistics center, and how you can optimize that, let's say, part of the chain to reduce your costs and also be efficient basically. So it's also inventory management. So you should make sure that your products, for example, are always barcoded. So the barcodes will allow the warehouse, but also the manufacturer, to basically keep track of the inventory. Every time you ship something out, to scan a barcode, you keep the record of it and you deduct from the inventory. Nowadays there are technologies that help you to do that, so it's super easy to keep track of your inventory and maybe have some reorder points, fixed reorder points, or dynamic reorder points. A lot of technologies out there for that, so definitely easier. And most of the times the warehouse itself, the fulfillment center, will already offer an all-included solution in the warehouse management system, which is the software that they use to integrate with you, for example, so that they also manage the inventory. So barcodes are really important. They basically help you keep track of the inventory correctly. You scan them only once you ship them out, and maybe once you inbound them. It really depends on the warehouse as well. Then we have serial codes, or the email for the phones, and so on. That helps you track the different steps a product goes through at the time they have been assembled, for example, specific, let's say, raw materials that has been used, and everything will be included as an information in the serial code or the email and so on. So that's why it's very important to, when you grow and you have a very complicated product, then it may be worth it to track with serial codes, for example. And as I said, the way you store goods and you pack them from the manufacturer, and that can actually impact basically your storage. So the way you how many goods you put on a pallet, for example, or in a box, that actually kind of impact also your storage. You can reduce dramatically also the way, let's say, how much you pay for storage fees, for example, because it's all about space, the space that you occupy. Same for couriers. That's why they charge you whichever is higher between volumetric and actual weight, because dimensions matter. How much space you occupy matters. So generally, you may have goods manufactured in China, you may have let's say a manufacturer located somewhere in the world, but most likely you will need to either import in your own country or import in another country where you have your own fulfillment center. And that's another step. That's basically understanding how to import goods before shipping them out. And there are local regulations in terms of VAT, and also how you're going to pay duties, taxes on those products. So you need to keep in mind that when you actually have a partner, you need to ship to them goods. So you need to pay most likely duties and taxes to import in that country, but then when you re-export, you may have problems if you need to be licensed, for example, if you need to have an export license or something like that. So it's still product requirements and regulations. So there are a lot of things to know. It's not simply, oh, I'm going to ship goods to a fulfillment center, okay, but do you need any license for your product, for example? Is it subject to restrictions? And that's for that specific country. And once you import in that specific country where your fulfillment center is, and you sell to any customer worldwide, let's say in the UK, and you ship from your manufacturer, which is located into a third country, So you have your own country, you have a second country where your manufacturer is located, you have a third country where your warehouse is located, and you have a fourth country to ship to. Well, all of them can have different requirements in terms of export. You may need to request different export licenses, for example, or some countries may have an export license to have, or some may not. So different things to keep in mind, definitely, but pretty much it's all related to how to import or export goods. That's on a high level for, let's say, bulky products when you're importing some stocks, but at the same time you have, let's say, the macro level, which is when you ship to single individuals worldwide to multiple countries, you also need to consider the import. Do I need to have an import license, or do I need to have any license to ship this product, any certificate or anything else? Then of course you keep in mind about let's say the couriers and the requirements of the couriers themselves. So there are multiple layers in terms of requirements. There is the requirement of the country, and there is the requirement of the let's say courier. So there are goods that can actually be shipped, for example, to Canada or UK, but it's the courier that cannot ship them. That's different. So what you can do there is to just verify if it's the courier that cannot ship it or it's the country that can accept it. Sometimes when you talk, in a different language to different country stuff, for example, it's quite difficult to communicate sometimes, and it may be that they tell you, oh yeah, you cannot ship that, but actually it's the courier that can ship, so you can just choose another courier basically. So you need to understand if the courier actually ships batteries, can ship your products, if you have any, let's say, sensitive material like water, like liquids, inflammable liquids, or magnets, for example, anything that may be dangerous or hazardous, and that's something that can be shipped via air, for example, can only be shipped via ocean, something like that. So you need to actually import in that specific country if you want to sell to any local customer. So different things to keep in mind for sure, and it's a whole process. It's not simply just, oh, I want to sell internationally, or I want to set up the logistics for my e-commerce. Do you have barcodes for your products? How are you going to do it? How are you going to import in that warehouse if it's a different country compared to yours? Do you need a VAT number? Do you need to do anything? You have a company or something like that. Will someone act on your behalf as importer of records, for example? The warehouse, how can I actually ship the goods? Do I need to arrange myself the forwarder? Can the warehouse help me? Can the manufacturer help me? You need to coordinate a bunch of stuff. And the last but not least comment that I have is, are you ready to actually set up the logistics for your e-commerce and, for example, ship internationally? Well, that generally depends on the number of orders that you have. Many people actually start from their own garage or from their own room, but at a certain point when you start scaling, you really need more space, you need a more efficient, let's say, process. You need to ship as fast as possible because customers nowadays are very picky. They want to receive goods right away. There's no time to pack them tomorrow and ship them the day after because you don't have time or something like that. So definitely don't rush it, of course, because if you don't really have the volumes or the capacity to actually outsource and pay for it, then it doesn't make sense. But if you're scaling, definitely you need to consider to have a third party. You may consider to have your own warehouse, but that's also quite articulated, because then you need to set up your own inventory system, let's say inventory track system, inventory management software. Yes, we have a lot of technologies nowadays, but still they may be independent, which means, oh, I just do inventory management, or I just do pick and packing, like the warehouse management system. I don't include inventory management. So you need to find a solution first, then you need to find a place, you need to find who packs, and you need to have a structure in place so that you keep track of your inventory correctly and you optimize your space. So there's also quite a lot of planning and let's say optimization and things to think about when you actually set up your own in-house fulfillment center or warehouse, which is definitely a headache compared to just outsourcing to someone else. So based on the level and number of orders that you have and the scale that you are having, you may consider to have also an in-house warehouse developed or outsourced to a third party. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like and a comment, but also to subscribe to our channel, because that will help us grow and keep yourself updated with the future videos that we're going to release. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.